Okay, thanks for joining me, Marissa. As many of you know, this is our face behind the Daydream Diaries. And if you don't know Marissa, then you should follow her immediately. If you're like me, the second you go onto her account, you want to go on vacation. And on top of it, she travels with 2 kids under 4. So that's mom goals to me. So thanks so much for joining me and chatting about all things sleep and travel.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, happy to talk because I feel like any sleep advice there's never enough. So I'm equally excited.
Amazing. Nothing makes me happier more than giving people back their sleep and also living their lives, because who doesn't want to do all of the things without being super exhausted? So I just want everyone to be able to get away on vacation like you do, and you make it look so beautiful. So we'd love to pick your brain about how you do it and make it look so relaxing and enjoyable with your kids in tow, and keeping your schedule in check as well. So not that it's
restful vacation, like I feel like Instagram, obviously gives the notion of that, but it's like still there's no sleeping in.
Yeah, right. Yeah. What is sleeping in anymore, right? Yeah.
I don't know, but when I have like a night alone, I still don't sleep in because I'm even scheduled now, right? Where it's like you're waking up at the same time you always do. But
it's totally. I completely agree. Yeah. I'm like, why am I not sleeping right now? I should be sleeping, but your body is just like, not ready. Mom life, time to get up.
Yeah. Internal alarm.
Yeah, exactly. So not that I need to tell you, but obviously you have an amazing following. Your followers sent in so many amazing questions. So I'm excited just to, chat more things about travel with you and answer some of their questions to get them sleeping well and traveling beautifully and making it all cohesive for you. So obviously you're a pro at traveling now with 2 kids, watching your stories and your feeds and everything like that. Like you said, it's not maybe not always glamorous, but you look like you got it all under control. The last time I traveled was, I think Liam was 16 months. It was right before COVID and he wasn't walking. So navigating the airport was easy because I could just strap him to me. But obviously Chloe does walk. So yeah, I was kind of wondering if you could kind of walk us through like some airport tips to make it easier, and like how do you keep her entertained when you're traveling? Obviously Gemma's a little bit younger. I'm sure you have some tips for that as well, but I know it's going to look kind of different.
Yeah, like I think most people, if you don't know, when the baby is like younger, it's the time to go. So I always say, like, if you're debating going with, a child that can't walk or like even under 6 months, like it's a dream because as you know, the sleep patterns are like, they sleep a lot and you could kind of mess up their schedule and it doesn't really affect them too much. But yeah, with Chloe, that was, that definitely made things more difficult as she got older, and she's a sassy one too. As you might see on stories and stuff.
She's hilarious.
Stuff, it's like I'll always have them in comfortable clothes. If we do like a later flight, I'll just fully have her in pajamas, like as comfortable as possible. That's like signaling that it's like going to be rest time. And then at the airport, we'll always talk to her about what we're doing. Like we have to go through the security line and we have to do this. And, I had a few books that I read to her before we did one of our trips. That was like when we were kind of allowed to travel there was that pocket. So she kind of started getting into her head of like what to expect, which I think was helpful. And then at the airport itself, like just like letting her run when we got to the gate and like go to the window and just kind of be free. It was like use that energy up, girl. But also too, like some people will be like, oh, like, they come on the microphone and they're like, oh, people with kids can board now. And it's like the first announcement. And I will literally try to be the last person on the plane because I do not want to be trapped on a plane, even for an extra 5 minutes.
I wouldn't think about that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. That's like normally at the airport, that's how we have kind of done things. And yeah, it's been okay. Like obviously if you have a stroller and stuff, that's great. Sometimes I find her, like she doesn't like the stroller. And then when we're at the airport, she does kind of want it. And it is a lot of standing. So it's kind of, I think, important to, if you do have a toddler, to maybe have that option, just because toddlers are unpredictable. So yeah.
That's super true.
Yeah.
Um, so I know you've done a lot of like you've taken Chloe on some long haul traveling, and I think Gemma as well. Maybe not as long, like long distance traveling. But how do you handle the time change when you get there? I know that can always be tricky, with kids, especially as they get older.
Yeah. I don't know, if you have some better, tips on this, but that was a big question that did come in like a lot of times. And I wish I had some like magic solution to be like, oh, you just got to do this, and like, you'll beat jet lag. But like as adults, like there's no trick to beat jet lag. Right. So I know that some people have recommended like, training for jet lag, kind of similar to daylight training time. And, I think that works if it's just a short, like maybe 3-hour time difference to like push back a nap 15 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that ahead of time. But for jet lag, the only way really like out of it is through it. And if you're going to go on the longest that we had was with Chloe was Tahiti, which was like, I think 12 hours behind. And, for her going on that trip rested was more important than trying to like figure out this massive time change ahead of even getting there. So, that was like a very, like that plane ride was not fun. And she was the whole time. And, it was like, oh my God, is this a bad decision? But then when we got to the destination itself, like she was so exhausted from the whole travel day that she like miraculously really caught up very quickly. Like within like, I think 2 days she was on schedule. So if people, I think one of the questions was about Italy. Someone was coming from Italy,
Yep.
France. I think if you're coming from Europe to Canada, like traveling west is always a little bit easier. So to keep that in mind, that you'll probably adjust much more quickly. And then maybe when that person is coming home, it'll take a little bit longer. Normally they say, I think it's like an hour.
An hour. Yeah.
3 hours.
An hour a day.
So that's kind of been accurate, but a lot of the time it's leveled out quicker than that. Another thing on jet lag, and sorry if I'm like rambling, but there's
it's beautiful.
Few things. Like we always found that we go to bed at the same time. So when we got to Tahiti, for example, which was like the longest time difference, we pretty much all went to bed. Like me and Aaron stuck out on the balcony for a little bit there and just like took a deep breath. But then we all woke up at the same time. I remember in particular, Chloe was very sleepy that morning. Like she was still sleeping. And as much as you're like tempted to have them sleep longer, like I got her up, we got right outside. We, spent a good chunk of time, like in that fresh air, in that natural light. And even I do that at home. So as soon as we get home, you're tired and I'm even tempted to sleep in, but like got everyone up, trying to get back to that routine and like open blinds, getting outside. I find that's kind of the best way to tackle it.
Beautiful. That's a lot similar to what I would suggest as well. We kind of say, depending on how long you're going for, and you might find this too, if you're going for a short trip and it's a small time difference, it's not always worth shifting to the new time change, just because by the time they get adjusted, you're going back home. So it's kind of weighing like what your goals are. Sometimes parents want to push their kids for a later bedtime. So if we kind of always err on, if you want to do that, maybe add in a short little cat nap if the time difference is big enough to do that. But, erring on the side the other way, maybe doing an earlier dinner so your kids can get back to bed at an appropriate time, probably will make it easier for that transition when you're there. And if it's a longer time change, we kind of say like split the difference. If you're going to be there for a long period of time, then kind of if they go to bed at 7, usually at home, and it's a few hours, and kind of meet in the middle. So in Europe, like the dinner's often later anyway, so pushing them that little bit can tend to help if they're, snacks are a great way to do that. Adding in a little cat nap if needed in there. And like you said, when you come home, so when you're there also, I would say too, is if you're planning on doing naps on the go, if you have a younger child, then, let them sleep a little bit if their naps are going to be as good quality naps as it would be, in a crib or in a hotel or something like that. But agree with you, when you come home, I would say don't let them sleep past 8 a.m. because getting them back on the schedule, like you said, it takes one day for 1 hour of jet lag, the experts, the unknown experts, but that's kind of the rule of thumb, right? So if you let them sleep in too late, then it's going to be this perpetual cycle of them sleeping in and going to bed later and kind of getting off the schedule. And like you would know, snacks are great for jet lag. It kind of, when our kids kind of get whiny and tired, if they're of the age to give them snacks and things like that, it kind of keeps them busy. Distractions, like you said, like taking them outside. Sometimes I even like putting my kids on a bath if they're old enough, even adding like glow sticks or things like that, just to kind of change up the scenery, or going to the basement or somewhere that's a little bit different, just to kind of help bridge that gap when we're kind of trying to transition them back.
Yeah, that's anything, right? Just to keep it like elongated.
Exactly. So to your followers, I wouldn't be afraid of traveling with your kids. You have personal experience with it. It's doable. It's just, when you get back home, just go back to what you were doing that was working before, and just be patient with your kids and give them a little bit of grace, because they're not going to likely come back and just, snap their fingers and get right back into the routine. But if you can keep it as consistent as possible, that'll make that transition home, as easy as possible for all of you. So
yeah, and that's like just like adults too, right? It's not like we just like switch back off, after like we get off the flight, right? It takes a few little bit, and
yeah, even
when you didn't have kids and could just like go down the house and Netflix.
Oh no, I know when Mark and I went to Hawaii before we had kids, and we had to make a late dinner reservation one night because we kept going to bed at like 6 p.m. like in Hawaii time, whatever time that was here, I can't quite remember, but we'd be waking up at like 4 a.m. and we'd be wide awake, and we're like, oh my gosh, how do we stop this like cycle of happening? Like, this is crazy. And then we'd be so tired by 6 o'clock the next day. So we had to like make a 9 o'clock reservation just so we would stay up to like appropriate time.
Kids, low-key. Yeah. It's like that, like I actually love, because I mean, to a certain extent, but like when you have kids, I actually don't mind that at all, because it's like, okay, maybe 4 is early, but like when we were in Costa Rica, like we were getting up at 5:30 and we would watch the sunrise, and it was like great. So that's a bonus of, jet lag.
It's true. And it's the heat of, depending where you are, like it's not as hot in the morning, you get to experience it a little bit different, especially with kids. I find like kids fatigue, I mean us as adults too, but the whininess kind of comes a little bit more, at least in my kids, when it's super hot. So it's nice having that pocket in the morning where it's enjoyable to be a little bit more outside and explore.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So you actually said something I was going to ask you about. So you mentioned that you kind of sneak out to the balcony. So I was going to ask you, when you're traveling with the girls, what do you do if they go to bed early and you're in the same hotel room, if there's not separate rooms? Like, what do you guys do? Like, are you kind of just sitting in the dark, sitting there, or like, what do you? Yeah.
Like, well.
If you're not sleeping, I should say.
No, but yeah, there's nothing like more depressing than like, feeling like you're trapped in your hotel room, like, right, especially when you're like on vacation. But you had kind of mentioned, like, when we had talked before, like, oh, like, was there a time where like things are really tricky? And obviously if you have the option to have like, a separate room, that does wonders. But like a lot of the time, sometimes like that's not an option, right? Like, especially hotels, it's like a whole like other added cost. So one hotel that we were recently in was, I'm not even kidding, it was like 10 by 10. I was like did I like we're cozy on in? And we actually had to take some of our luggage and like keep it in our rental car, because like granted we did luggage on that trip, but I'm like, okay, what are we gonna do here? So what worked, and again, it all depends too on like how old your kid is, what are they sleeping in, right? So at this point was sleeping in a bed, but she was open to sleeping in cribs.
Okay.
On the trip, and I think she kind of felt like special that she was sleeping in something like similar to Gemma. So the bed was literally just like right in the center of the room, and there was like tiny little space on each side. So we put one like pack and play on this side and one pack and play on this side, and we grabbed the curtains and like wrapped it around the girls' cribs. And the other side, like we kind of dragged the curtain over the windows, and like luckily, in that situation where we were, it got dark, relatively early. And yeah, we just kind of like put on the sound machines and, cover them up. We did spend time on the balcony, but then like we'd come inside and like turn on the TV. And though it was like a very small hotel room, like the white noise just kind of did its job on each.
Beautiful.
Had those like curtains around. So that was like probably, you know, the hardest kind of like hotel room to, you know, finish.
Yeah.
Oh, you could, if there's a closet that's doable, you could stick the pack and play in there.
Love the closet.
But like, always hesitant about the bathroom just because it's like, I don't know, like I always have to pee like 5 times a night. So
yes. Hi, me too.
There is a few products that like I could definitely share with my audience, and I'm sure you know about them too, obviously being sleep experts, but you know, the Slumber Pod is like a higher priced item, which I don't have, but I've heard people talk that it's like, you know, really, really great. And it like this big contraption that goes over a crib that like blacks it out. I have one, I forget the name of it, but I will link it for everyone. And it just kind of goes over the crib nice and tight, and it creates that like black environment. Cool. Which has been helpful for certain situations. And then, yeah, like we'll bring garbage bags as backup sometimes.
Love the garbage bags. Yeah.
Cheapest, best way. And like, you could make them the size you want. And
yeah. It's funny, like the makeshift things you do, it's beautiful, you know, as long as our kids are not, you know, close to the things that are around them, like whatever works to kind of make a divider, it's beautiful. And I agree with the bathroom. The bathrooms are fantastic if there's more than one bathroom, but when there's just one bathroom, it can make it a little bit tricky. I'm the same way. I have to go to the bathroom at night. So to feel like I couldn't would make it worse for me. I feel like I'd really have to go if not. So
yeah, like one time I think I went to the lobby. I'm like, this is never happening again. Right. And certain things too, like with that point is like, it is trial and error, right? Like you might have to travel your first few days just to get the hang of like how it all works. Right. And if I could figure it out, anyone could figure it out. Right. It's just a matter of kind of going through it, and everything's kind of, you know, figure outable. Like you could figure it out and find a solution that kind of works for your kids too. Right. Depending on how they are and all that. But,
for sure. You're right. Every family and every travel situation is unique, but you're right. You kind of find your niche, and, you know, like headphones are like our best friend on vacations, because we can, like, if we have an iPad or something, we can at least put them in if we're worried about the noise. White noise is fantastic to bring along, because you're right, it just drowns out all that background sound, which is beautiful. And obviously, like balconies, like you mentioned, is nice to have. At least you can kind of get outside if it's keeping the room pretty dark. And yeah, or like adjoining rooms. We went to Mexico for my sister's wedding with my mom, and we were fortunate to have an adjoining room. So we were able to put Liam kind of in the bathroom closet area, because fortunately, sometimes, you know, hotels don't have closets with doors. It's more like sliders. So then trying to find that little nook to kind of tuck them in, it works too. So yeah, you're right. It's like trial and error.
Go in.
Yeah. Why is it?
Well, even like on the point of the balcony, I remember like being there and I was like getting bit, like the mosquito repellent was inside. I'm like, it's fine. Like
I don't want to wake them up. That's hilarious. Do you, when we're traveling with Chloe, especially that she's like a bit older now, do you find that she has any like sleep regressions when you guys come back? Or like, you know, toddlers love them, and I have them, so I feel like I can say this, but, you know, they're just super smart and like to kind of test boundaries and push envelopes. Do you ever find when you guys get back from vacation, you know, she's a little testy, I don't mean testy, but a little sassier, maybe to see what she can get away with it? Because obviously kind of things are, you know, dynamics are different and room situations are different when you're traveling.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The girl's a full-fledged actress. Like she's an actress, like drama, like pulling out every excuse. A lot. She's gotten better. She has gotten better on that. But like when we get home, she's like, oh, we're not sleeping in the same room. And I'm like, no, like we're in your home room now. Right. And she knows that. And it's like, I feel like when we've gotten back from vacation, like it's, again, tough on adults to be like, oh, back to, you know, normal routine life. But she's regressed a few times, very, not anything big, but if I let her run with it, she would totally keep it going. I think one of the times, you know, she was crying about even going to sleep. Like, I don't want to go to sleep. And, you know, and we've been we're pretty firm with things getting back on track. And even just trying to keep schedules, like we are pretty firm on it. So I know the last time we were like, nope, you're going to sleep. Like that was it. And she cried. We let her cry for a bit. And then in the middle of the night, she did wake up. And at that point, we did let her come in our bed as like just like a slow transition back to real life pretty much. And then I think she tried again the next night, and then we like put our foot down. So we gave her a little, but like also we're kind of back to like really getting on track of that. But she hasn't regressed, like in terms of like, you know, waking up every single day or anything like that. We dealt with a little bit of a regression with Gemma, kind of waking up, but it was like part of her like 4-month regression. So I wouldn't say related to travel.
Right.
I think I had a regression question.
Yeah.
I think there's a few of them. I'm not sure the specific one, but
yeah, we can talk. Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah, that's perfect. Let's chat about that. So we like to call it, versus a regression, more of a progression. So for those of you that may or may not know, when we have newborns, there's 2 cycles of sleep. It's deep REM and REM. So that's why it's so beautiful. When we have sleeping babies, we can just rock them a little bit, put them down, walk away, and they sleep for hours. And it's like, our life is fantastic. And then all of a sudden it changes and we're like, oh my gosh, my baby's broken. Why are you not sleeping anymore? And what I used to do would work. And now you're like, either I put you down, your eyes like pop open right away, or you sleep for really short periods of time. And it has us wondering as parents, like, well, what's going on? What changed? So what really changed around 3.5 to 4 months, they have this, what we know it as the 4-month progression, but really what's happening is a progression because they're actually developing proper sleep cycles similar to those that we have as adults. So it's not just the 2 stages of sleep. We have like the drowsy, the light stage, the deep stage, and it's a cycle for like 30 to 45 minutes of sleep stage. So that's why often we see our babies, if we're doing something to get them to sleep, like nursing or rocking or bottle feeding them or doing something that we're actually putting them to sleep, they wake up after this 30 to 45 minute mark because they didn't fall asleep independently. So they don't know how the skills to be able to fall asleep and stay asleep and link their sleep cycles back together to continue sleeping, which is why parents often see this 4-month regression. And we work with a lot of parents to support them, to teach them independent sleep skills. So something you can do just right off the bat to help kids with that is kind of following this eat, play, sleep schedule versus play, eat, sleep, because often kids develop feed to sleep association. And that's one of the most common ones. Where they think that they need to eat in order to go to sleep. So then they'll wake up looking for that thing that we did as parents in order to get them back to sleep because they don't know how to put themselves back to sleep on their own. So that's kind of what this 4-month progression is that we see. It's just actually our babies developing into, not adults obviously, but developing more into adulthood or toddlerhood and things like that, just because they're getting the proper sleep cycles that we have as adults. And we all have partial awakenings at night. We just as adults are able to turn back over and go back to sleep. Well, when our kids don't have the skills to do that independently, that's when they cry and they look for us. And then that's when we're often going in multiple times a night trying to do something. A lot of the times, that looks like hunger. And you should always feed your baby, of course, but we also want to put some rules around, understanding if they're actually hungry or if they're looking for, we call it a sleep prop, something to help them get back to sleep. So I believe someone else asked a question about, what was it? It was similar to that, I think, with a 1-month-old and just like their sleep cycles, whether they should put them down in the crib or if it's okay to do contact naps and things like that. So I'm going to say yes to both. If we can start early and teach our kids some independent sleep, getting them drowsy, but putting them down kind of awake still, they can start really gently at a newborn age. We're not able to sleep train them in the sense that they don't have their circadian rhythm isn't developed. They actually don't have the skills in order to, cry, self-soothe, and put themselves to sleep. But if we can keep them drowsy but awake and put them down like that, where they're kind of going down independent, it's just setting a really nice stage that as they get older, we really get the ball rolling and snowballing. They understand that independent sleep, that they're not looking for something to put them to sleep. And then as they get a bit older, drowsy is going to stop working because drowsy turns into the first stage of sleep. So getting our baby drowsy and then putting them down, that's often why we see their eyes open and they get really upset and they're kind of starting this whole process all over again because they've actually entered the first stage of sleep once they go past that like 3.5, 4-month mark, which is why parents run into issues. But on the flip side, our babies are only little for so little. So it's about finding the balance. Yes, of course, you can contact, hold them and let them nap on you. There's nothing wrong with that. I encourage that, but it's just finding the balance. So, sleeping as they get older, but even when they're little, like morning, we have the most melatonin. So it's easier to nap a little bit more independently. So if you can focus on putting them in the crib for the first couple naps of the day, and then obviously as the afternoon gets harder, our melatonin is less. We're kind of building it up to go back to sleep, but it kind of drops down. Then doing contact naps there is great. Or if you have to run errands or things like that, obviously, we can't, there's appointments and things like that. We can't always dictate, and it's not a perfect schedule, but if you can kind of try to follow that, it'll just set you up for nice success as your baby gets older and starts developing those different sleep cycles. And you still get that one-on-one, time, because time goes so fast, and, you blink your eyes and it's gone, and you don't want to look back thinking, well, I wish I held them more and did the thing. So, I think there's a really gentle balance to that. So
I think you had helped me when I was kind of talking about Gemma's, she wasn't napping so long, and you had kind of said that the naps do get longer at a certain, they connect their nap cycles, right? At 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. So around 4 months typically is when we want to see at least one of the naps extending. So often parents, we always, this is really important, so I don't want to discount it by any means. We're so focused on our kids not getting overtired, but sometimes undertired can also be a problem for our kids, because they know what to do in their crib, but they fall asleep rather quickly, but then they wake up after that 30 to 45 minutes and they're awake and they're not tired anymore. So we always want to find this gentle balance between not pushing our kids to overtired, of course, because an overtired baby, just will have a lot of tears. It'll be really hard to fall asleep. The naps tend to be short. It's not fun for them or for us, but we also want to push them a little bit so they can link that sleep cycle where they actually have enough sleep pressure, with the timing to actually fall asleep and stay asleep, and then be able to link that. So around 4 months, you start seeing that happen. Around 6 months, it should really happen. So, anywhere between that 4 to 6 month mark is kind of when we start seeing them lengthening. But by 6 months of age, you do want to see those naps lengthening. And then that's kind of when they switch, sometimes they do 3 naps still, and sometimes it switches down to 2 naps based on, what they're able to do, and just finding their sweet spot with their skills as well. And that timing piece is huge, to support that as well. So yeah, you're totally right though.
About a 3-month-old, which was kind of similar what I was dealing with at that point, was just she had said, there was a lot of 25-minute naps. And I, off the bat, was that seems pretty normal. Until, now I'm getting longer nap times. Gemma's almost 6 months, and it's I think it was her first too. So I think that's pretty normal, right? At 3 months to have 25-minute naps, and then they normally elongate or go longer. Yeah. Around 5 or 6. Yeah.
The only thing I would just make sure that they're not doing is if you're doing something to put them to sleep. So again, if it's a feed to sleep, then that's the only time I would say, try to not do that, because it's quite normal to have these short naps, 4 naps a day, that makes sense. But also we want to make sure we're setting the stage nicely for independent sleep. So when that time, when they're able to do it independently, you're not, running into this spot where you're actually having to teach them how to do it, which of course, teaching them how is, we do that. That's what we do. That's what we're here to support parents with. But if you're able to set the stage, it just makes it, easier for you and your baby. And then it just nicely, transitions organically versus having, a baby that was doing these short naps, but sleeping still, and then fighting naps and having trouble doing that. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. Just, it's quite normal for that amount of time. And, 4 naps is great, but, just setting that stage for independent sleep will also just help as they move through the ages and stages.
Kind of set them up for kind of thing. And so back to the regression. So I know it's kind of a balance of maybe you feed them a little, but other times would you maybe recommend just patting their head during a regression, to soothe them, or it depends how long they kind of cry? I know there's so many different methods with that, but
yeah, let's talk about that, because I think that was someone else's question. Do I recommend the cry it out method? So typically that's not our go-to method, and the reason why it's not our go-to method is because the way we do our program, when you watch awake times and you're not getting them drowsy and you're disassociating the eat to sleep part of it, then we can make these changes for our kids that there's still going to be a little bit of tears because change, you know, for any of us is hard, and that's our kids' way of, you know, responding to the change and communicating to us. But when we have all the timing right and we're looking at all the pieces, you know, holistically for them to support them, then that piece actually is really short. You know, the first couple nights might be hard, but then sleep's an intrinsic motivation. So the more they do it and the more they do it independently, the better it feels for them and they want to do it. So when we're setting them up for success with awake times, making sure they're getting enough naps, they're not getting overtired, you know, they're, you know, learning how to do it independently, then, you know, that the tears kind of just go away. And I'm not saying there's no tears ever, but it really minimizes it. And then we want to make sure they have enough sleep pressure built so when they go to sleep, they're able to stay asleep, so we don't see these, you know, wakings that are not due based on, depending on the ages, like due to feeding needs or something like that. And then by doing that, we really just reduce the tears and we see changes rather fast. Like when we work with families, a newborn is a little bit different because it's a longer process when we support them, because like I said, the circadian rhythm isn't developed. So it's a longer, you know, we're setting the stage until we're able to kind of turn on that piece for them. But typically by the end of week 1, like you see kind of a lot of where you want to be. And then week 2 is just, you know, tweaking pieces. So if you're doing, you know, sleep training on your own and you're having, you know, making all these changes, and by within a week, you know, 10 days, you're not really seeing any changes, then that's a good time to reach out to for support or to ask the questions, because we should see those changes by that time for our kids, because we don't want to see the tears, you know, for extended periods of time. And as parents, it doesn't feel good. We want to solve our kids' problems. We want to support them. So when we work with families, we kind of decide what's best for the family, because obviously every family is different, every child's different, but we have like a stay in the room method where you can actually stay and be with your child and support them, you know, kind of laying it on thick for the first couple nights and then backing it up, because like patting them, like you mentioned, that's, you know, great at first, depending how your child responds to it. Some children, my daughter, if I did that to her, she's like your daughter, very sassy. She would be very angry with me that I wasn't doing the thing that she wanted me to do. So that probably would make her cry 10,000 times more. Where other kids, that can be really comforting to them. So, you know, with families, you decide what that looks like for their child. And then, you know, it's okay to support them a little heavier at the beginning. Like even like you mentioned, when you come back from vacation with Chloe, you do a little more and then you back it off. And that's much like infants. We do the same thing, because we don't want that one sleep prop that we're supporting them with, like feeding to sleep, for example, being replaced by rubbing their head, thinking that they need their hair stroked in order to fall asleep. So there's that gentle balance of that. And then obviously there's a leave and check method where it's more interval-based check-ins. Some kids do better with that because, you know, us being in the room, our presence is just more stimulating for them. And then there's more tears. So it's just kind of figuring out what the best balance is for that child and that, like the parents, of what they feel comfortable with as well. So that's kind of I don't know if I answered your question, sorry. That's kind of my recommendation with the format. We want to support our kids the best way, but I wouldn't say, you know, putting them to sleep, closing the door and like, you know, just leaving for a long period of time is the best way, just because there's more gentler ways to do it, to make it gentle for us and gentler for them, and let them learn. They learn really quickly, which is such a beautiful thing. Once our kids are able to have this independence, they want to do it and they learn quickly and they take to it. And then it's just our consistency and response. Like, you know, if we're going in sometimes and doing something and sometimes we're not, then our kids often tend to cry a little bit more because they're wondering, well, what's mom or dad going to do this time? Maybe I'll get them to, you know, rock me and do the things that I love them to do. So by keeping consistent just makes it more, like the more consistent we are, the more consistent our kids will be as well.
Yes, which I never thought I would like be that person, being like
right. Yeah.
person now. And for us, that's what works. And it also has had great kind of like outcomes with the girls too. So with Gemma, when she had that regression, for us, like you said, like the rubbing the head did work, but you know, like I know she probably wanted to be nursed, so that kind of I think soothed her a little bit. And then we did have to let her find out a little bit, but it also did go past a week, right? So I think like you said, going on and you're doing all these things that you're kind of suggesting, then it's like I would be like getting you to come to my house and like help me, right? So because every kid's so different, right? Where some plans need to be kind of probably, you know, tailor made and all that.
Yeah, and some people just need, like, I was one of them previously before coming a sleep consultant. I just needed that. I was like, what do I do? Where do I start? So the nice thing is we do it virtually, so you could literally be anywhere. I have clients in Hong Kong I've worked with, and just as we do this digital sleep log on top of like the sleep support and the plans. So we actually watch timing, so I'm able to tell you how to tweak it to make it easier for your child. So yeah, so if anyone's watching this and they're like, oh my gosh, that sounds like me, I've tried sleep training, it didn't work for my baby. I would say it can work for all kids. It's just making sure we're finding that correct balance and mix, because again, every child's different. Every child has slightly different awake times. Just that's why it's an average. So, finding their sweet spot will just really help, make it easier for them. And then there's also the motivation piece. I believe someone asked about, I think it was a 20-month-old, if I'm not wrong, that was getting up at 5:30 in the morning, and they've tried, earlier bedtime, later bedtime, like all the things in between, and they're just having trouble, which is hard. And early mornings are hard because as parents, we're tired, and 5:30 is quite an early start of your day. And there is the odd kid that's just an early riser, but a lot of the times there's little pieces that fit the puzzle to why they're getting up. So a big piece of it is motivation. So little things that we take for granted as parents and we don't think are factors enough that our kids won't want to sleep is like bringing them in the bed in the morning. So when they get up, sometimes we bring them into our beds and we just give them a nice cuddle, or we feed them right away. We get them up and we feed them right away, whether it's bottle or nursing, or we put the TV on, depending on the age, of course. Pardon?
You're real yesterday when it's like, hey, Dad, 5:30, like, you want to watch something, right? And then they gave that, and yeah.
And he did that. My love Mark, but my husband did that. And of course, like you mentioned with Chloe, that night, my son's a good sleeper, but that night he woke up at 10:30. He was kind of crying. I went in. I'm like, what's going on? I don't want to sleep anymore. But of course he doesn't want to sleep anymore, because in the morning when he said that to Dad, he didn't have to sleep anymore. So, then it's just really like, no, it's sleep time. This is not happening anymore. I told my husband a few words, and, we carried on again. But kids are smart, and they're going to test. So even at a young age, they know that. So they might not, be as calculated as our older kids, just with rationale reasons, but there's motivation piece. So I really look at that piece. Is there something that's motivating them to get up that's worth waking up for, than continuing to kind of turn back over and go back to sleep? So that's a big piece of it. Of course, independent sleep, depending on how they're falling asleep, that could be a piece of it as well. Just because we could be nursing or feeding or rocking or doing that and getting them to sleep. And kids sometimes have the ability to link their sleep cycles, but then they wake up for whatever reason thinking that they need mom or dad to do the thing that they did before to get back to sleep. Even though they've linked all their sleep cycles for quite a long period of time, they're still motivated for that reason to see, will mom and dad come in? Or if you've responded before and you've come in, then, again, it's the motivation piece of, if I wake up, maybe mom or dad will come in and I'll get to do the thing that I want to do. So I would look at that. I would look at, over and under tired. I think she said he was getting 2 hours of sleep in the day, which is good. But, what time is bedtime? Sometimes if we put our kids down too late, depending on how long it's taking them to fall asleep, they can wake up because they're overtired and they seem done for the day. So a good cue of that is, if they're waking up with tears, then they're probably not done sleeping, but there could be other factors that are causing them to wake up. Between 4 and 5 a.m. is our lightest sleep cycle. So external factors like a car door closing, even the air conditioning turning on, or a furnace, noise outside, birds chirping, light is a huge one. So if the room isn't super, super dark, if light's creeping in, especially with the summertime coming, that's also, our bodies are signaling that it's light out, it's time to get up. So our kids can get this false sense of a start of a day because of it. And then often as parents, depending if our kids have an earlier wake time, and this may not be the case with this child based on the age, but sometimes if our kids wake up really early, we put their naps earlier. So then it perpetuates this early morning waking, because they go down a little bit earlier for their nap, and then their next nap, and then their bedtime's earlier. And then it's a vicious cycle of waking up a little like continuously early. So, those are some pieces I would look at if you're struggling with that. On Instagram, on our Bedtime Beginnings, we do have some tips for early morning waking. So you can always check those out as well if they need a little bit more, support. And of course, if nothing's still working, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to, chat about that, because there could just be small tweaks that need to be made, and you don't have to get up at 5:30 every single day because on vacation, like you said, maybe in Costa Rica where sunrise is nice, but every single day for
no, not going to bed as a family at like 8 p.m. right? Like
right. It's and
I feel like like Chloe's had a few of those. I remember I moved up her bedtime and that worked, but it sounds like she's kind of exhausted, a lot of options. I found, I don't know if you use the Hatch light.
I love the Hatch light. Love it.
And it's like, so we only have it chirp and go orange at like 7. So it's like, and I've noticed Chloe now even to at nighttime, she'll go to bed, but she won't go to sleep right away. Like because we put her down like at like 6:45, which is kind of early still, I guess.
No,
yeah, not it's that early, but she will kind of like talk to herself and do that. And it's like, that's fine. And then in the morning, she only knows to wake up when like the birds chirp, or not wake up, but like leave the room, right? Or like, so I found that worked for us, but I don't know. I'm sure she's probably tried that, or like, I think there's like the go.
So the grow light, the only thing I would caution parents about that is nothing's wrong with it. If you have it, it's fine, but just go into your kids' room and close the door, because it's actually very bright. In the day, it doesn't look bright, but at night, it's actually very bright. And blue light actually blocks melatonin production, which is funny because at nighttime, the light is blue. So it's odd. Yeah. So so it's I would just look into that. So I'm not saying don't use it, but just muffle the light a little bit if you find your kids are having trouble. Maybe even put it, so it's not shining in their face when they're trying to sleep. You kind of put it back a little bit. If you have older kids, a digital clock is also great. It's a super cheap way to do it. If they're able to match, if they're not able to read numbers, but they're able to match, you can cover the minutes, put a sticky note of like a 7 beside the 7. So when they match, then it's a good signal to the kids to get out of bed. So there's things like that, like I love the Hatch light. I have it as well. It's a little bit more expensive. I kind of wish I knew about it when I had my my registry, because the great part about it, as you know, is that you can turn the light off and it could just be a sound machine. So it grows with them, which is, I love that. And
it's like Gemma's is like very light orange and it's not super bright, but when we feed, I like brighten it up and open the window. Like I just love the functionality of it, especially from the phone, which is nice. But yeah,
the phone is fantastic. And that's a good point you said too. Like, the orange amber lights, like that's inducive to sleep, where like the blue light and like this really bright white light, that's actually not conducive to sleep. So, just finding the right colors, if you're going to use colors as well, and making sure they're not shining bright in your kid's face will also help with that piece. So I would just, if I was your mom waking up with an early rising kid, I would just look at those kind of pieces, and also look at when are they napping. Balancing out the day is always helpful too. Like I mentioned, if you're getting up too early and you're doing too early of a nap, it's just like it's a vicious cycle. So, that's a piece I would recommend looking into. And then I know we had another mom or dad, I'm not sure, ask the question about the child with autism. So I know I shared with you before, but this past December, my son was diagnosed with autism. So I have a lot of experience with it with my own child. I'm actually taking a course. I don't wish that we were talking tomorrow, but I'm taking a course how to support autistic children with sleep. So I'd be happy to share whatever I learned from that, just to give a little bit more insight. But as this mom probably knows, she mentioned that when they go on vacation, they have their child has a hard time sleeping. So, and they tried a lot of things, keeping routines the same, but it hasn't really, helped them. So not maybe as people know or don't know, autistic kids have different sensory experiences than us, and they also often have sensory overloads, which is why we see like some stimming and things like that take place. So with vacation, depending on when you're going, there's a lot of transitions, and transitions are hard for autistic children as well. So going from a restaurant to here to there to everywhere, it can be overwhelming for them. And our body produces cortisol when we're dealing with stress, which is the opposite of melatonin. So if it's happening close to bed, that can also inhibit our melatonin production, which makes us kind of get some more adrenaline, we're waking up more, and we're doing the opposite of what we want to do at bedtime. So sometimes our kids just need a little more time to decompress. So that may mean going to dinner a little bit earlier, going back to the room a little earlier, having more of that quiet time to kind of decompress. Visual schedules are fantastic. I'm not sure if this person has one. I'd be happy to share it if they need it, just so our kids can understand, what's happening next. Keeping the same bedtime routine like they're doing is fantastic. Noise can also be a factor. I know, like, my son is okay with white noise. He likes it to sleep, but some autistic kids, it's actually, too much for them. So hearing it can make it impossible for them to fall asleep. So depending on where you are at hotels, if it's noisy and you're not using white noise, like that can also be something to look at. And then also remembering, for all our kids, that when we're in the heat and we're on vacation, we often fatigue earlier because we're so stimulated. So just watching for that dip in that tiredness and kind of honing in on that area when our kids are tired, assuming it's an appropriate time. If it's like 4 o'clock, they're getting tired, I would obviously not suggest putting them to bed. But like you mentioned, that like to say they're usually going to bed at 7:15, but at 6:45 you notice that dip, then that's a good time to get right on it and get them into bed as well. And then this is a blanket statement, so I'd always say, talk to me, or talk to a sleep specialist or a doctor. But sometimes we don't recommend melatonin for long-term use because it doesn't really help with sleep. But in a situation like that, melatonin could be a good use if your child's having a hard time falling asleep and it's a specific situation like that. But always consult your doctor because they're the experts on that area. But that could also be something to look at. And of course, as I mentioned, when I learn a little bit more tomorrow, I'd be happy to share, any other tips and tricks. But I would just say, that transition piece, the visual schedule, they're doing everything right. They're keeping, their routines the same, but just to try to help, and then watch for that tiredness dip as well. And then of course, supporting our kids if we need to, if you're not sharing a bed, try not to do that, because again, autistic kids are pretty routine based. But if you have to sit beside them on the bed or sit on the floor just to support them a little bit while they fall asleep, then obviously do that. And then when you get back home, like we talked about, you just get back into your normal routine and schedule and consistency, and you respond accordingly. So that would be my advice to kind of how to navigate that.
That had asked that, but hopefully she tunes in, and I'll maybe mention that because that's very helpful.
Yeah. So yeah, and I'm happy to do follow up about that, because all kids, when they're not sleeping well on vacation, it makes vacation not as enjoyable. Not that we don't love being with our kids, but there's so much going on. It's hot, you get tired, and the more tired our kids get, the more fortunately whiny they get. And as parents, that's we want to unwind a little bit too. We're balancing all of that with our families. So
and so I know you mentioned the melatonin, just, regardless if your child is having like a really bad sleeping spell and maybe you're away for a month, what about lavender oil? What's your thoughts on that? I know, again, it could be like a blanket statement, but like, if it's been like a week of like bad sleep, do you find that like using a little bit of something like that's fine if you're getting desperate, or is that not something you recommend?
Yeah, I feel like you can try anything. There's nothing wrong with trying things, but often if there's a bad stretch of sleep, I would look at the causes of it, like what's changed, and then kind of try to pinpoint that. Because often as parents, we do things where we're like trying to support our kids, but we actually, it's kind of like pulling a string and like unraveling it all, and then you're trying to ravel it back up, and you're like, I don't know what I did to, like, we were doing fine and I did one thing to help and then this other thing to help. And often as parents, we do all these things at once. I'm a human. I've done that too. Or I'm like, okay, stop. I need to do one thing and see, what's changed. Sometimes we think, are they too cold? Is it too bright? Is it too dark? Are they wet? All of these different things. We're kind of going through this Rolodex in our mind, and so we start doing all these different things to try to support them. And then we don't know kind of where we are. So I would, slow down, roll back. If you can log their sleep, like start logging if they're napping still, like what time did they get up at? What time did they nap at? Look for that awake window piece and see if you can find a pattern on what's going on. So lavender, like, it's natural, so it's not gonna, like spraying it in the room or something like that. It's not gonna do anything wrong. But I would just look at more of that, what's changed piece of it, and like what are you maybe doing different that could impact it. And then also look at their age. Like oftentimes we see this, we say bad sleep spell, but as our kids age and stage, they can just handle a little bit more of awake time. Or as parents, we, again, we err on the side of caution, which is good, but sometimes they just need a little bit more time. So it could just be things like that. And on Instagram as well, we have some sample schedules that parents can download if they kind of want to see, approximately where, kids should be based on their age. There's that resource as well. Again, all kids are different, but sometimes it's nice, just knowing like in and around where am I in the right kind of area. So lavender, nothing's wrong with lavender. But I would like melatonin, I would not recommend using unless it's like, really small specific cases, just because it doesn't teach long-term sleep and it doesn't solve long-term problems. It solves, it's more of a band-aid for a small thing. Maybe it's okay, but long-term, it doesn't really help our kids. And some parents we've worked with, they've used melatonin and their kids are actually like more wired after that, depending on, again, there's lots of situations around that as to what's going on before they took it and how they're falling asleep and all sorts of things. But I think like learning this, looking at what's changed and making sure they have the skill and the time and timing around it would be more of my recommendation. But you do what works for your family as well. There's no blanket statement, of course. So thinking of vacations and like having kids like have a hard time sleeping and things like that, I'm dying to know, because like I said, your pictures are beautiful. Have you ever had like a trickiest vacation with the kids, or like a situation when you're on vacation that you're like, oh my gosh, I like wish we didn't do this, or I wish I could reverse time and do something differently? Has that ever happened with the girls?
Yes. I mean, of course, we're human, we're all human. We're not going to have like this perfect vacation where like my toddler is like, yes, mommy, like, oh no, I won't have that cucumber. Or yes, I cucumber. Of course we have a lot of like meltdowns here and there. But I guess, with the second, I was just a little nervous going on our, first trip of 4, and it went better than expected. And I do, kind of attribute that to like Gemma being a more easygoing baby. So that certainly helped. But honestly, I think with flights, it's always just, you never know how it's going to go. Like you could train, you could have pajamas and all these snacks and these games and all these Pinterest things that a lot of the time certain toys are great. Like, I'll bring a little, actually have like certain things not purposely here to like I'll bring little beads and stuff like this on the plane that she just, how toddlers are, they like all this random stuff. And like a lot of the time it works. And other times, like, she's past her, her time where she wants to be up and she wants to sleep and she's uncomfortable. And I just think some flights go really well and some have been terrible. And the flight to Tahiti like still gives me like the shakes, because it's like, I just remember like, how do I escape this plane? Like, can I go? Like, I think she was like 12 months at the time. So she was moving, but, still a baby. And I think all the flights before that had gone so smooth. So granted, it was a long one too. And we also were in the airport for a layover for like 8 hours. So yeah, it was just a lot. And I was like I was up the entire time, and then she fell asleep 15 minutes before we landed. And I was, this is great. I'm so happy we did this. Right. And you like, I remember even being like getting off the plane and like this mom was like, I've been there. Like, you did great. Right. Like they felt bad. Like they're like this poor like couple. Like I think me and Aaron were like bumping heads at that point too. Right.
Of who wouldn't, right? Like, yeah.
But then it's funny because like I always tell people, I'm like, you always forget, like, okay, that flight I do remember, but once we get there, like it's out the window. Like you're in this beautiful, location and atmosphere. And she went to sleep that night and she slept like the whole night. And that was like a crazy time difference. Right. So you're always going to have some moments that are like icky and brutal, but like, that's also part of traveling in general, right? With adults. And I know I've said that a few times now and you're probably like, okay, but like you can lose the luggage, you could do this. So it's like, you know, if you have a meltdown with your kids, like that's also part of traveling with them. And a lot of the times too, it's just like, they're going to catch up and end up being fine. It's just, they need to kind of go through the motions. And I think a lot of people feel like that on flights where they're like, I've had it. Right. But we know how to act. Right. So the Tahiti flight was the worst. But then on the way home, she was great. And we brought a pack and play for our 8 hours in the airport, and she like slept in there. And
amazing.
So I forgot about it, right? Like at the end of the day. So that was up there, but there's been a few, I think when we were in Arizona too, she woke up in the night and she was like inconsolable.
No.
And yeah, that was a real bad one where she like, it was me and my mom, and she just like wouldn't stop for like a solid hour. And then she went back to sleep, but it was like, I'm like, is she possessed? Like my mom's like, acting sports. And again, it's like, most of the time for me, it's been like the beginning of the trip or the first flight where you're like, is this a bad decision? Right. But yeah.
Well, it's great to hear you share that, because, you know, as you're right, as parents, like you have that cringy airport, and I think it's so important. Like you said, it's nice to hear other moms say like, you did great, I've been there. Because I think as a parent, you're so like worried about, you know, even before I had kids, I remember being on planes like, oh my gosh, why is this kid crying? And then you have a kid and you're like, well, I'm trying all the things and I just can't get them to stop. So I think like you said, it's, you know, as humans, it's so nice to just, you know, cheer each other on as well, because you should go on vacation, you should do all the things, but it doesn't make it easy.
And because I remember too, like pre-kids, like, you know, being like, oh God, I see a baby. And like the most part, you have your headphones on. So like no one ends up hearing your kid.
Yeah.
It's when they kick the seat that like, that sucks. So we always try to get a row that like that's like right near the bathroom, like
right
there. So like if now we do that after learning like toddlers can kick, and it's really annoying. But in crying baby, like a lot of times everyone has their earphones on or they're sleeping, they're watching something you can't hear, right? And people, if they have kids at home, like they get it. So
it's true.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks for sharing everything. I think we got everyone's questions. I think there was another question about the Merlin suit. I don't know. So the Merlin suit, let's talk about that. So the Merlin suit is fantastic. It's great for, if you're not familiar with startle reflex. You can probably speak a little bit more to this because I know you use it as well, but it kind of holds them like almost like a T with their bodies to help that startle reflex. You know, babies around 3 months, but by 6 months, startle reflexes really muscle a lot more. So the question was, when they roll over, like when should I stop using it? When they roll over, my baby tends to cry when they're stuck on their stomach. So I would say, 6 months is a good time to stop using it. When your child, there's a couple of things to look at. Like if your child's able to roll from front to back, like in a day, I would recommend doing lots of practice of that, just so at nighttime, our kids often like to do those things in their sleep space because it's safe and comfortable for them. And why would they not, try to do all the things when they're supposed to be going to sleep? But sometimes our kids can also become dependent. I don't want to say dependent, not the right word, but they can become accustomed to that extra, support with their arms. So, and then we want to also balance that when they roll to their stomach, sometimes with our kids, it can become a reason to get mom and dad back in the room. So I'm not saying don't support your children. If they're in distress, you go in and support them. But sometimes we can go back in, roll them back over, and then they roll back over again. And then we roll them back over and they roll them back over again. And then it becomes this ongoing, thing that we're just continuously doing. And we're like, when do we stop doing that? So I would recommend just doing as much tummy time in the day. You can always roll a receiving blanket up underneath your child if they haven't fully grasped the skill to roll back over, and kind of tilt the blanket to the side like this, so we can kind of help them feel what the motion feels like. And the more we do that for them, the more they'll start independently doing that. And then, the startle reflex part of it should have muscled enough by now. It doesn't mean their kids won't startle. We still startle as humans in general, but it should muscle enough that that dependently waking up because of it should be enough to be able to take them out of like this arms out and into like a proper sleep sack, because it is a little more stiff. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, would you recommend like a traditional sleep sack after that, or yeah?
Yeah, I would probably just go to a traditional sleep sack. We want to make sure our kids, especially when they're trying to roll over, we want to make sure that they're able to, and I haven't used the Merlin, so like you probably could speak to this more. They can bend like the arms aren't fully stiff, correct? They're more like
they could like, yeah, bend it. It's just like you look like the Marshmallow Man, just kind of like.
Right. So yeah, I just make sure that, if your baby rolls over, they're actually able to put their hands down and like, lift their head up and do the things that they need to do. If they're starting to do that and they're not able to do it with the Merlin Suit, then I would switch them over to a, sleep sack just for safety reasons. So they're able to, turn and do all the things that they need to do. But it's just a normal sleep sack is great. Look at the TOG ratings depending on the temperature in the house, of course. But that's what, yeah, I'd recommend doing that. It's nice. I like using sleep sacks at that like 6 months age. To be honest, until my son transitioned into a bed, I used a sleep sack for a long time. Just because even toddlers can kick off blankets and have a hard time finding them again. I feel like it wasn't until he was like closer to 2.5, 3 that he actually kind of developed that skill to like find it and fix it. But yeah, just a normal sleep sack, and then just all the practice in the day as well. And then just again watching that turning over. If our kids are crying, their arm or stuck or something is distressing, like as parents, we should always use our discretion. We're not just leaving them in there. But sometimes it's by giving them a few minutes. Often as us as parents, when our kids cry, we rush in really quickly. So if nothing's wrong with our kids, sometimes waiting 15 minutes, and that's what I was going to mention about the 5:30 in the morning waking too. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping back, but when our kids cry, often we go in right away, but sometimes we just have partial awakenings where they're just awake, but they're just trying to get comfortable again. And when we hear them, we go in and we kind of disrupt that process. So same for like flipping to their stomach. Sometimes they just need to learn to get comfortable, assuming that they have the skills to, turn their head and make sure everything's done safely. And then sometimes giving a little bit of time is also beneficial as well, because, I know my son for a long time, he was a chunky guy and he hated sleeping on his stomach till he was like 9 months old. It was quite long. And I got into the battle of like turning him over because he would cry. But in time, it was like, in the middle of the night, I saw him on the camera. I'm like, oh, he's on his stomach, I guess he's fine. So, and then from that point on, I'm like, okay, I'm not rolling you back over unless something is wrong, because you did it and you were fine. So I don't know if that answers that question, but that's kind of my recommendation around it.
So I think like seeing them, you get used to that routine of like back is best, which it is, right, for the beginning. But then when it's time that they can sleep on their stomach, you're like, this feels weird, right? It's like,
it's true. And then eventually, like I like as sleep consultant, I would recommend always putting your baby on their back. If they roll over into their stomach and they're able to turn and do all the things, then it's okay to leave them. But even as they get older, put them down on their back. And then if they flip right over, we often see kids, once they get comfortable on their stomach, that's like their preferred sleeping way. They just, they're going to go to sleep because they roll over and they go on their stomach, and then, they're out for the night. So,
unless you have a toddler, starfishes, and then like,
yeah. Crazy stories. Anyone who's ever slept with a toddler knows it's not a good time because you get kicked in the face.
I'm not enjoyable to be in bed with. So
yeah, I like the middle. If I could sleep alone, I would. It's like I would.
Yeah.
But so I think I started saying that and I said it too soon, but I think we've answered everyone's questions, I hope. If we didn't and someone's like, oh, you forgot me, reach out to us. Be happy to answer any more questions. But thank you for chatting with me about your experience with travel and, enlightening us on all your tips. It's awesome to hear from you, because it's awesome to follow along visually, but it's really nice to hear about your experiences and just what works for you guys. And, you're a mom, so you get it. And, as from a mom to a mom, it's really nice to, hear about all of that and seeing that you can still do the things that you want to do. Because I know you traveled before the girls, and I think it's amazing that you're still able to do that with the girls and they get all these, amazing experiences with you guys.
Thank you. Well, it's nice to chat with you. And, I know you'll be putting this out there, so I'll definitely make sure everyone could, listen to it another time, and hopefully someone gets to chat with you, one-on-one and get a consultation. So
yeah, we'll do the winner. It'll be exciting. And if anyone ever has any questions or concerns, or just, feeling that sleep is not ever in your cards, reach out. That's not the case. I was a tired mom. No, you were a tired mom. We've all been there, and it doesn't have to be that way forever.
Yeah.
You deserve alone time. We
Yeah.
love our kids, but
Makes a big 100%. And I definitely feel like it's the one thing that people should personally spend time, like, even if they're really like struggling, to speak to you, because it is, you get your sleep, like it is a game changer, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I love sleep, and I love sleep pre-kids, and I love sleep now, and I love my kids, and I love bedtime. So
Yeah.
it's all lovely. Lots of love all around.
It was nice chatting with you, and
Nice chatting.
we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Bye.